Okay. Um, Thanks for coming in, Shannon. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to connect with you and hear a little bit more about what I can do to help. Can you, maybe a good place to start would be telling me a little bit about what brings you here today.
Okay. I am with my husband. He's not here. He's actually at a meeting, so he can't be with me today, but we are trying to become pregnant. Um, and we've been trying for a little while, but my friends and my parents have actually brought it to my attention that there is a concern for alcoholism. And I know there's fetal alcoholism for like the woman's perspective, and I don't drink, but my husband does, and I'm appreciative that he's not here today to talk about this. And I wanted to kind of understand if maybe the reason why we're having some issues is because of his end, or if that's something that I should even consider at all to bring up with him. It's kind of complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Great. Well, I'm happy to talk with you about those things and see if we can answer some of your questions and hopefully put some of your concerns at ease, or at least put a plan in place that might put some of your concerns at ease. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure, thanks.
Um, one thing that didn't come through on the paperwork for your referral today was I'm not clear on your age. Are you
Oh,
able to share me how old you are?
I am 29.
29. Okay. And I'm sorry, did you say this was your husband or your partner?
He's my husband. We've
Husband.
been married for 6 years now.
6 years. Okay, great. Um, and is he roughly the same age as you?
Yeah, he's 30. Yeah.
Okay, all right. That just kind of helps me kind of get a big picture in place, because there's a lot of different factors that affect fertility and, healthy babies. And so it just helps me start to get some of the pieces in place.
Yeah, any information that you need, I'll try.
Okay. Well, one thing that I did want to touch on was that you shared, and I'm glad you did, that you were maybe relieved or glad that you came alone. Do you feel
Yeah.
like do you feel like it gives you a little bit more opportunity to ask questions you might not be comfortable asking otherwise?
Well, it seems to me like it's just something that I want to learn more about before I bring it up with him, because it's so the alcohol part of him, it comes from his family. He grew up in a family that believed in cocktails before dinner, and like when his parents came home, they had a drink to calm down. And originally that was kind of endearing on my end because I came from a family that was really sheltered and we didn't do anything like that. So it didn't seem like they were using it out of control. And you know a person longer when you marry them, and he does use it as almost a need to come down after his days, and it is daily. So it's one of those, he's not mean, he's not angry, he's not any of those big signs that screams alcoholic that he become very defensive to with that term. I just want to know if this is something that I should even be worried about when it comes to our child and what we're I mean, if it's affecting his fertility or if it's just even affecting the possibility of our child being born normally, that'd be huge. So I want to be more educated before I bring it up with him because it is part of his culture and I don't want to make him defensive.
That seems really sensitive of you. I'm happy to talk with you about what I know about, fetal exposure. You mentioned fetal alcohol syndrome, fetal alcoholism. Is that something that you have a lot of familiarity with? Do you know a lot about fetal?
I did not look it up. It's definitely one of those things that my family has brought up because they're concerned. Um, so I tried very hard not to look up any information before coming here today.
I'm proud of you. That's really hard to do in the age of Dr. Google.
Yes, yes, it is.
Well, good for you. It sounds like you're really trying to be measured, and it also sounds like you're balancing concerns of your family and your own concerns, but being thoughtful about your husband's, perspective. So that's really hard to do. So congratulations on being able to do that thus far. Well, their fetal alcohol syndrome is kind of an umbrella of a number of different symptoms or presentations that you see in a baby or a very young child. Typically that was exposed to alcohol in utero. So their mother, while their mother was pregnant and they were in the womb, their mother was drinking a lot. And, the kind of constellation of symptoms and what that typically looks like for a baby that was exposed, sometimes there's some facial abnormalities. There can be, these babies can be really small, often they're, like under 10% of average. And they can have some brain structural and kind of neurological problems. Sometimes it can be severe, with the reduced IQ. And then there are some other things too, like kidney problems, for example. But that's just kind of a very general, very brief overview of, what it can present like when a baby has fetal alcohol syndrome. That typically is only a concern for when the mother is drinking excessively, and because alcohol does, when it gets ingested by the mother and gets into the blood, it does cross the placenta. And it actually takes the baby a lot longer to get that out of its system than the mother does. And that's when we can see those exposure concerns and risks that we worry about when we talk about fetal alcohol syndrome. As far as males, a father of a baby drinking and causing any symptoms like that, there's not a lot of literature that says we think that happens. And I think most doctors would flat out tell you, no, that doesn't happen. It's not possible. In medicine, we don't like to say that's impossible until we actually have data that shows us that it's pretty impossible. But it's very, very, very unlikely that your husband's drinking would give a baby in a pregnancy that you all created fetal alcohol syndrome. We don't think that happens. Okay. You did mention something, and I wanted to get back to that. You've been trying for a little while, and it didn't sound like you've been trying for eternity, and you feel really frustrated about it. But can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It hasn't really been that long. It was one of those ideas that once I got off birth control, I'd be pregnant immediately, and that didn't happen. So it's been about 4 or 5 months. So I'm not ready to look at other options for that yet. It's just, that was one of my questions.
Got it. And did you just stop using birth control about 4 or 5 months ago, or?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay. Well, from what I do know about, prenatal fertility, and preconception, is that it's fairly typical for women to need to be off birth control for a few months to really get their cycle regulated where they could get pregnant pretty typically and normally. So, I'm not an OB, but I wouldn't be panicked about that yet, just like it sounds like you weren't. And, the OB wouldn't really be concerned about you and your husband having fertility problems until you had tried consistently for at least a year.
Okay. Good.
They often won't even see you until you tell them, I've been trying for a year. I want to see if there's something else going on. Okay. What I can tell you about alcoholism in men is that alcohol use can reduce fertility. Okay. So it's more likely that your husband's alcohol intake, which I have a few more questions about just so I can make sure I'm talking about it accurately, to make sure that it's possible that heavy alcohol consumption can make it harder for you to get pregnant. But we don't think if you get pregnant that alcoholism contributes to your baby not being healthy.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure. I can tell it's been something that's been weighing on you.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is a difference between us. And it's not something that I hate about him. It's not something that I would ever want to change. But it is something that is on my mind.
Right. And I can imagine, is it difficult for you to feel like you could bring it up with him because it's such a part of his family's culture?
I feel like I could bring up this type of conversation with him more and just saying that it could be affecting his sperm count rather than saying it would actually hurt our child's future. Mostly because one of those is kind of manageable. It's kind of like if you just stop drinking for this long, which we could start a recovery pattern for him a little bit. And I know that might be like an intention on the backside of my agenda, but it's more approachable when it's not so big, I guess, because it's one step at a time, right? The first step is to become pregnant, and then the long-term step is what type of child will we be bringing into the world. And we're kind of still at this first step, and I just wanted to know if that was, yeah. And I know that I came here with a whole big picture in mind, but I'm trying really hard for myself to just say, okay, step one, get pregnant, and then face the battles day by day. So I mean, that's kind of, I can't take the whole conversation back with him with the fear of the future, because that's not always accurate. Daily things could change, and we've had discussions before. We're pretty strong with our communication skills, so I'm not too worried about bringing it
back. That's good. So I guess to back up, and in my mind, it's kind of pre-step one. Can you tell me a little bit about how that feels for you, for me to share that information, that would be more of a fertility concern than a health of the baby concern?
It relieves me, because I don't ever want to change him, and it's not his drinking isn't awful. Like I have friends who have husbands that are true alcoholics, where it is actually affecting their lives or bringing it to work and those types of things. But I would never compare my husband to be that type of person. So it relieves me that I don't continue to think of him that way. So bringing this information back will be helpful and good.
Good. I was wondering if there was a part of you that that might have been disappointed that you didn't have this kind of more powerful piece of information that might,
get him to change.
Yeah. So that's why I was asking. I was wondering how you were feeling about that.
Me as a person, I don't like forcing change on people. It's actually probably one of my strengths and weaknesses in this marriage. I am slightly concerned. I am concerned. I am concerned about his drinking. But now with this information, I don't have to be completely deal breaker concerned with this. It's not something that will change how he is living. I mean, we have discussions about it. He is very conscious about it. He is very aware of my concerns with it.
Oh, okay.
So it's not the only difference that the negative information, if I had brought that back with him or with me to him, that would have probably created an argument, whereas this might just have more discussion in the future. So
okay.
I don't feel disappointed with that. I feel like it's another step to consider in the long run.
Good. Well, it sounds like you've thought through what the information will mean and how you'll take it back to him. And do you feel good about going back and starting a conversation with this information? It sounds like you feel more positive about that.
I do. I'll take some time to consider how to do it, mostly because there are emotional aspects to it, but not always bringing those emotional ideals into the conversation is usually how change happens. So I do feel like I have a plan as to how to bring it back with him.
Great. Well, it seems like you've been very thoughtful about this whole process, and it seems like you're very thoughtful about him and his perspective, with his habits and the family culture he grew up in, and and that you seem very kind of steadfast in your kind of loyalty to him as a person and not wanting to force change. And that sounds like a good foundation for parenting.
Well, thank you. I actually really appreciate you saying that.
Sure. We've talked about a lot. Are there any burning questions you have before we talk about a few more things?
No, I think you answered the big one and all the following questions after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So let's stop there.
Okay.